Have you ever used a nipple shield? Have you ever tried to wean from a nipple shield and it was really difficult? Are you a lactation professional or perhaps somebody who helps people in the perinatal period, a doula, a mental health professional who listens to people cry in your office because they've been using a nipple shield and they're frustrated because they can't wean from it? Well, today we are going to talk all about weaning from the nipple shield and some of the things that I have seen help families to be able to gradually start feeding their babies from their bare body and not be so reliant on that tool. So let's get into it.
When I began breastfeeding, I was blindsided by how difficult it was. I may have thought I was prepared, but having known only a handful of people who had ever breastfed and only seeing it up close from a couple of them, I had a huge learning curve. Since then, I've become a doula, a lactation consultant, and a childbirth educator. I'm your host, Lo Nigrosh, and I welcome you to the Milk Making Minutes, where we explore breastfeeding experiences through the lens of systemic barriers, so that you know your breastfeeding struggles are not your fault and your triumphs really are the miracles you feel they are.
Before we start talking about weaning from the shield, I just want to give a gentle reminder that if you are using a shield, regardless of why you started using it, whether it was given to you under the best circumstances or not, you're using it now. And it's the tool that has been helping you feed your baby. And we know that often nurses in the hospital will hand out nipple shields when they don't exactly know how to help a nursing dyad, meaning the parent and the baby, resolve nursing difficulties. And the only thing they do know how to do is supply the nipple shield, or lactation consultants in the hospital are overworked and there are too many patients for not enough lactation consultants. And so that is a tool that they can supply to people who are having difficulty latching when they don't have the time that they need to be able to work with every patient. So many people end up with nipple shields, and then sometimes they are not given the advice to continue working with a lactation professional after they leave the hospital. And so it does end up sometimes that people are using nipple shields when they needed some help establishing nursing to begin with. That being said, that nipple shield has been helping you feed your baby. That nipple shield has been helping your client feed their baby. And so, yes, they can be a little bit cumbersome. You can lose them. They can drop on the floor in a dirty place that you don't want to put in your baby's mouth. They can rip. It's one extra step that you have to add to nursing your baby. And they have helped so many people be able to feed human milk, their own milk, to their babies. And that's a great thing. So if you're feeling this overwhelming pressure to wean off the shield because you feel like somehow you are not as good of a breastfeeder or a chest feeder because you're using a nipple shield, I want to release you from those feelings because that's just not the case. We all have our difficulties. We all carry from the very beginning some sort of guilt about the way we're parenting, whether it's that we didn't have the birth that we wanted, or we can't get our babies to sleep in the way we're told that we should, or babies are colicky, or we're not feeding our babies in the way that we expected we would. I just want to tell you that there's no pressure. There's no pressure to wean off the shield if it's working for you and if it's not impacting your supply or impacting you negatively. That being said, we do know that sometimes use of the shield can negatively impact supply. There is some data to indicate that. And for the reasons I've mentioned already, sometimes they can be a bit cumbersome. And so often people do want to wean off the shield. And so, my very first tip that I like to give to people when they are working towards trying to move from a baby that will only nurse with the shield to not using the shield is to first of all just have as much skin to skin time as possible and to make your breast or your chest as available to the baby as possible without expectation of nursing. So, even between those nursing sessions, if you can have as much skin to skin time as possible. So, even if you've already returned to work and baby's still on the shield, on those times when you are home after work or on the weekends, do lots of skin to skin time. And a great place to have this skin to skin time is in the bathtub. So, if you can get in a warm bath with your baby and let them just be on or near your chest or breast, this can make your bare breast or chest be a really familiar place to the baby. It can stimulate some of the breastfeeding reflexes in your baby. It can stimulate some of those feel good hormones in both you and your baby. And sometimes it allows your baby to have a little bit of that exploration time, and they might surprise you and just start latching. But they need to have the time to do that, and it needs to be in a low pressure situation. So sometimes what happens is the only time they're near our breast is when we are wanting them to nurse, either with the shield or without. But when it's without, we are sometimes more stressed. They are receiving those stress signals, and it becomes a situation in which it's impossible for them to nurse. Just have that skin to skin time. And over a period of a couple of weeks or even a month or two, you might see that your baby begins to nurse on the bare breast more frequently. I do want to mention that when we're talking about weaning from the shield, depending on how old your baby is, it might take a couple of weeks. It might take a few weeks. It could take a month or 2 months. And so, really be approaching this as you're going to be exploring, you're going to be trying different things, you're going to continue to use the shield to feed your baby, and you're just going to see what works for your baby. And you're going to be patient, and you can get your baby to wean from the nipple shield. You're not going to give up if that's a goal that you have. It could take a while. The next thing is that often you can present your bare breast to the baby when they're sleeping. And one of the times when you know that it's a great time to present is when you notice rapid eye movement in the baby. So that's a great time to know that they would latch and begin to nurse. Also, if you see them start to wiggle or start to fidget around, but it still looks like they're sleeping, you can try to latch. If they're not awake fully, then they might not notice or be as picky about whether or not there's a nipple shield. So if you are able to catch your baby in these rapid eye movement parts of sleep, or when they're just starting to wiggle or fidget, then you might be able to get some bare chested nursing. And then by the time they wake up, they'll be on the bare chest or breast. And over time, they'll become more accustomed to that feeling of not having the nipple shield on. Another thing you can do, which is a pretty common technique, so if you have done any research at all about weaning from the nipple shield, you've probably heard this one, but start out with the nipple shield and then do the bait and switch. So start out with the nipple shield and then at some point during the feeding, slip it off and try to get them back on. Once they've had a little milk in their tummy, once they've been nursing for a little while, once the nipple's been pulled out through that use of the nipple shield, they may be more likely to get on the nipple.
Are you pregnant or a new parent looking to ensure a better postpartum experience? Or are you a birth worker looking to improve your postpartum care skills? Check out Thriving After Birth, an online self-paced course by me, midwife and educator Tanya Tringali. It's 10.5 hours of video content featuring experts in lactation, mental health, pelvic floor health, pediatric sleep issues. You also get worksheets and a workbook, as well as options to have a one-on-one session with me. Sign up at motherwitmaternity.com/thriving, and let's improve postpartum care together.
A few other things that you can try is to hand express and make sure that there's milk on your nipple, and also hand expressing beforehand. Make sure that they don't have to work as hard to get the milk flowing so that when they get on, there's already milk there and available. You can also squeeze milk on or into their mouth as you're trying to help them to get latched on to your bare body without the shield. You can also manipulate your body using what we call the flipple technique. So this is pointing your nipple up towards the back of the baby's mouth so that it touches the upper palate. And you do this by holding your thumb at the top of your breast and kind of squeezing the top of your breast so that the nipple is pointed upward, and that nipple will touch the top of the palate then. And that is what the nipple shield does for the baby, especially if your nipples tend to be on the smaller side. That might be helpful for them as they're getting latched. And finally, if at any time your baby is getting frustrated or stressed out, just stop. And it might be that some days or some nursing sessions, your baby latches without the nipple shield. And some days or some nursing sessions, your baby does not latch without the nipple shield, and they will need it. So it's not going to be a straight line. You're going to have some ups and downs. You're going to go forwards and backwards, and that's to be expected when you're trying anything new with your baby. Now, let's say you've been trying this for a while and you're not having a lot of success. I highly recommend that you seek out a lactation consultant, an IBCLC, because if your baby is struggling so much to feed from your bare body, it could be that there is something going on anatomically that is making it difficult for your baby to latch. And you may need to get some answers about that. And so don't be afraid to reach out to an IBCLC. Often each state has a listing of private practice IBCLCs in your area. Many IBCLCs can either bill insurance or provide you a super bill, an invoice, so that you can try to get reimbursed from your insurance company. If you live in Massachusetts or southern Vermont or southern New Hampshire, I would love to be the person who helps you if you are struggling to wean off the nipple shield. So you can find my information at www.quabbinbirthservices.com. If you would like a virtual consult, I would be happy to do that from just about anywhere. And finally, if you really care about why So many people end up on nipple shields without getting the proper help. This is definitely one of these systemic barriers that make feeding our babies so difficult. And you want to discuss this? Join my Milk Making Minutes community group on Facebook. That is a place where we are gathering to discuss all of the barriers that exist that make feeding human babies human milk more difficult. It's a place where parents, care providers, lactation professionals all come together to discuss those barriers. I'll see you there.